Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everyone. Here from the rainy Northeast at the ETV Community Media Center. Happy to have you joining us. 479 solo shots hit so far in the big leagues this year, over 100 in this past week. And before I get into the topics that are just very juicy this week, I want to give a shout out and some attention to a player that I did not realize I was not familiar with his game. And that is Mr. Jordan Beck, left fielder for your Colorado Rockies. I noticed when I keep track of the solo home runs, I count them up, I write down who did them. Jordan Beck in the last 2 days has hit 5 solo shot home runs. And it's in 3 games. He had a doubleheader on Thursday. He hit a solo home run in the first game, 2 in the second game, and then last night hit 2. All 5 home runs hit this season are in the last 2 games. And you're just like, oh, maybe he just got called up, or no, Jordan Beck's been on the Rockies since opening day. And what's interesting is if you look at Jordan Beck's stats from that small sample size, that opening day series, he was hitting very close to what his cup of coffee in the major leagues was last year. Last year, he hit 188. In March this year, he batted 167 with a 286 on base, a 167 slug, and a 452 OPS. But since the month of April has started, this man is batting 333 with a 438 on base, a 963 slugging, with an OPS of 1400 on the dot, raising his season's OPS to 1109. He has, 282 batting average, 5 home runs, which were also shots hit in the last 2 days, and 9 RBIs. This is a guy who isn't being talked about because the Rockies are bad, but Jordan Beck was someone that had some prospect pedigree a few years ago. I remember people were excited when he got called up, but with Brenton Doyle's breakout and, Zach Veen kind of waiting in the wings, Jordan Beck was kind of a forgotten man, and he's been crushing it lately, especially the last couple days. If you were betting on Jordan Beck to hit some home runs the last 2 nights, multi-home runs, you were doing really, really well. So shout out to Jordan Beck. I hope he can continue this. I know every time a Rockies hitter is doing well, that people don't want to credit them. They want to call it the Coors effect, XYZ. He's been hitting all over the place, including, that doubleheader was at Kansas City, which is not as hitter friendly as Colorado was. And now he's facing the Reds, which are an offensive juggernaut, at home for this series throughout the weekend. And maybe he can continue this streak of solo home runs. So, keep an eye on Jordan Beck. I definitely am now that I've seen him popping up in my solo shot tracker and looked into the stats. His Baseball Savant page is a lot of red, including arm value. He's got a 96 percentile arm value, so he's got a cannon in the corner outfield to go along with this hitting. That's a really valuable piece for a Rockies team that doesn't have a ton to be cheering about so far here in 2025. Now, the thumbnail is probably going to get a lot of clicks here, and it's because Ronald Acuna has been in the news lately for some negative reasons, and it was just so fitting to me that there was a picture of him from a dugout celebration a couple years ago. The Braves had a sword, because Ronald Acuna just flat out stabbed Jared Kelenic in the back. He threw him under the bus because Jared Kelenic was not fast out of the box. He thought he hit a home run, and he was thrown out at second base. And Brian Snitker, the Braves manager, in the past, has pulled players from the game for not hustling out of the box, for not, making these big mental errors, that can that prevent the team from scoring more runs. And Jared Kelenic wasn't taken out of the game. Ronald Acuna Jr. tweeted out that if it was me, I would have gotten pulled. Now, Ronald Acuna Jr. is still rehabbing his way back from his second ACL tear. One of the true elite players in this game. If you're talking, players that you'd like to build your franchise around, you wouldn't get to 10 names before Ronald Acuna. He's that kind of building block piece. And he's clearly frustrated both with the injury, with the contract that he's saddled with for the next 3 years. When he sees Vladimir Guerrero getting $500 million, when he sees Juan Soto getting $765, Ronald Acuna Jr. with his $100 million contract is feeling pretty frustrated with his ability to not be on the field, with the injuries, and he has something that those two players don't have. He has an MVP award in his trophy case. He has a World Series ring in his trophy case. I know he didn't win that World Series with the Braves, but we'll get to that in just a second. But you can't have your star player being that frustrated. And, Brian Snitker, they've made a point to say that his contract is over at the end of the season. The Braves are, we're off to an awful start. They're starting to hit with Sean Murphy back, and they're progressing. They're playing better games, but the vibes have been all bad for the Braves this season. There's been some highlights, obviously. Like I just said, Sean Murphy, since he came back, has been swinging it. Spencer Schwellenbach's been, one of the breakout pitchers in the National League. But Spencer Strider's back. That's very positive. But the Braves aren't playing at the Braves' expectation level, and Ronald Acuna Jr. Isn't back in the fold yet, and it's a really rough look for a franchise that a couple years ago you were looking at it and saying this is the best built, best run franchise. Like they commit and lock these players up early. They're willing to pay early. They want to build a culture of winning, and then you see the culture of Ronald Acuna tweeting about that, and then former Brave and now broadcaster Jeff Francoeur was on local Atlanta radio, and he was asked about the situation, and he came to bat for Jared Kelenic. He said that Jared Kelenic was, in the manager's office crying and, felt very sorry and apologized after the game, for letting the team down and, taking, a runner in scoring position opportunity away from a team that desperately needs the offense help. And he went on to say, the unspoken thing that, is true, but it's not something I'm holding against Ronald Acuna, that the Braves have been able to win a World Series without Ronald Acuna Jr. And, if he can't get with the program, essentially, that, it doesn't matter that he's the most talented player to put on a Braves uniform. He called him the most talented player to ever wear a Braves uniform, but said that Ronald, they can win without him. Right now, the Braves have been winning some games without Ronald, but they're still, not where they want to be in the division. I think they need Ronald Acuna Jr. back to get into the playoff spot that they want to be. But it's just a really rough look that you have, one teammate throwing another teammate under a bus, the manager who has pulled players from the game, not being consistent with that situation, leaving Kelenic in the game when he's pulled, guys like Ronald Acuna and Marcell Ozuna from games for not hustling out of the box when they thought they hit home runs. And then you have the announcer going on sports talk radio, and I don't mind him going to bat for Kelenic. Somebody needs to go to bat for Kelenic. Brian Snitker kind of dodged the questions. Ronald Acuna was very aggressive. Jared Kelenic was very sorry, but I don't mind Jeff Francoeur going there and saying that, but for him to be confident and talking on sports radio that they can win without Ronald Acuna Jr. is very troubling. And there's been buzz that, they trade Ronald Acuna Jr. in the next 18 months, that they could get a Juan Soto type haul that just helped, both the Nationals and the Padres restart a winning cycle with some talent and depth. I don't know if it's going to get to that point, but the vibes are really, really bad in Hotlanta right now. And I just want Ronald Acuna to be back on the field. I want him to play to his full abilities because, 40-70, he's only been done once. And, that's the guy. That is the guy. He's electric when he's on the field. And I want him to come to bat for his teammates and for himself, whether he wants to be that guy that, shuts the haters up about him not being the guy that was on the World Series roster to then leading the Braves to another World Series ring, or, just playing well enough and being enough of a professional where another team is willing to give up a huge haul to get Ronald Acuna to come over to their franchise, as, the Padres and the Yankees both gave up to get Juan Soto back in the day. Now, a little bit more positive here. Just a little bit. It is incredible to me that Hunter Brown, who was a true breakout pick for me for the Houston Astros, has been shoving 24 scoreless innings streak currently active going into this weekend. He's supposed to pitch. Hunter Brown, doesn't have the name recognition, I think, yet, but he's become the ace of this Houston Astros staff, as good as Framber Valdez has been. And, he's going to be an all-star in the American League, but he's positioning himself quite well to be a guy that it makes a lot of people money on the AL Cy Young future betting front. He has been absolutely shoving. And if you look back to Hunter Brown's last 26 starts, he has a 1.98 ERA. So far this season, the only pitcher with a lower ERA, minimum 125 innings pitched, is Paul Skeens. So that's the kind of class of pitcher Hunter Brown has been for the Houston Astros. He's been absolutely shoving. I was very unhappy when I got sniped in fantasy baseball for Hunter Brown. He's been the truth. He's been that guy. His teammates talking about that when they're coming off a loss, he's the guy that, he's the type of guy that they expect to right the ship. So very, very exciting to see Hunter Brown, breaking out into full stride and starting to get some of the recognition and the eyeballs on him, because he was fantastic in the second half of last year. And because of how the Astros season went out and they didn't get to the ALCS for the first time in a few years, the Hunter Brown kind of craze didn't get into full effect, but he is absolutely dealing right now, and you gotta love that. Speaking of dealing, I asked last week if the Chicago Cubs could keep this up. And what have the Chicago Cubs done in the last week? Well, they've won 3 straight. They're 7-3 of their last 10, and they have not one, but 2 of the Game of the Year nominees already in their bank, and they won both of them. The Diamondbacks game, where the Diamondbacks came back and then the Cubs walked it off, and then the Dodgers going back and forth. It was absolutely unreal. This Cubs team is slugging for the fences. Kyle Tucker has completely transformed this offense. Michael Busch is hitting. Dansby Swanson's had a great start to the year. Seiya Suzuki is raking. Ian Happ is Mr. Consistent. You got guys like Nico Horner and Miguel Amaya and Pete Crow Armstrong, performing better than expected. This is a really, really scary Cubs team. And even with Justin Steele being announced that he's out for the year, this Cubs team looks like a serious contender in the NL Central and maybe the NL beyond. The Brewers have come down a little bit to earth, with their pitching troubles that they've had early to start the season. The Reds have been a little better. So those 2 teams are kind of right behind the Cubs, but the Cubs are looking like the clear best team in the NL Central right now. Whether it be their starting rotation, whether it be Ryan Presley holding things down on the back end, or whether it be this lineup that is just absolutely unreal. Kyle Tucker, to a lot of people, is the NL MVP frontrunner. I think he's in the finalist discussion, but I wouldn't give him that just yet. but he's been absolutely transformative to this Cubs lineup. He is exactly what they were hoping Cody Bellinger would be for them when they re-upped Cody Bellinger after that 1-year prove-it deal. And I'm very, very excited to see how this Cubs team does down the stretch. They're a type of team with Justin Steele's injury that I could very much see trading for a starting pitcher before the trade deadline to kind of bolster that team and push for October, which, the Cubs fans in Wrigley, some of the best fans in baseball, been really, really fun, to watch them do their thing. Here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, we can throw back down the third base line to this day in baseball history. April 25th had quite a few moments that were interesting to me, whether it be games and debuts. But I'm here to talk about the debut and the career of, one of the best pitchers that most people haven't heard of. Addie Joss, on this day in 1908, 1902, made his major league debut, and he threw a one-hitter for a win. It was absolutely electric. Addie Joss's debut was storybook. It's considered by many one of the greatest debuts of a pitcher ever. And it's crazy because against the St. Louis Browns, he had a no-hitter into the 6th inning. Hall of Famer Jesse Burkett of the Browns led off with a short bloop fly to right field that Zaza Harvey tried to make a sliding catch on, but the play was ruled a base hit by home plate umpire Bob Carruthers, who was also a Hall of Famer, which sparked a heated protest from Cleveland. At the plate, Addie Joss had an RBI double, and they beat the Browns 3-0. Addie won 17 games as a rookie with a 2.77 ERA and was invited to play in what was the All-Star game before the All-Star game of the All-Americans, team made of American League stars who played, a similar team from the National League during the winter tour. Addie Joss had an incredible run, a 9-year career, short peak guy, 45.3 WAR, 160 wins, a 1.89 ERA, which is the second lowest of all time, minimum 1,000 innings to Ed Walsh. He won 20 games 3 years in a row from 1905 to 1907, which in 1907 he led the league with 27 wins and a 1.83 ERA, which did not lead the league. In 1908, he pitched to a 1.16 ERA, which, 68 Bob Gibson would be jealous of that kind of thing. And extremely sad end to the career because it's very possible that he had a Tommy John injury in his elbow, which caused him to miss quite a bit of time down the stretch, both in 1909 as well as 1910, his final season, age 30. He only made 13 starts, 13 games, went 5-5 with a 2.26 ERA. He was absolutely unbelievable. He pitched, 300 innings, back-to-back years in 1907 and 1908, over 200 innings, 7 of the 9 years that he played. And he struck out 920 batters in 9 seasons in an era where people weren't really striking out. His whip of .968 is the all-time mark, and he led the league in whip 2 times. He had an ERA plus of 204 in 1908, and that was with 325 innings pitched and 130 strikeouts, an ERA, of 1.16. He was unbelievable. And Addie Joss passed away, unfortunately, due to tuberculosis. Right after his 31st birthday, he was rehabbing from his elbow injury and passed away. And it was incredibly sad for the baseball world that he wasn't able to, have the full career that was expected of him. And it was just really, really devastating for the time. So many people knew the talent that was there. Teammate Napoleon Lajoie said in Joss's death, baseball loses one of the best pitchers and men that has ever been identified with this game. Joss's funeral was held in Toledo on April 17th, 1911, a day when Cleveland had a scheduled game against Detroit, despite orders from American League President Ban Johnson for the Naps to play the game. All of Joss's Cleveland teammates went on strike and insisted that they were not going to play. They were going to attend. And former ball player turned evangelist Billy Sunday, who I hope to talk about on a future episode, delivered Addie's eulogy at the funeral, which at the time was the second largest in Toledo history. Joss tried to strike out death, and it seemed for a time that as though he would win. The bases were full. The score was a tie with 2 outs. Thousands, yes, millions in the nation's grandstands and bleachers saw breathless watching the conflict. The great twirler stood erect in the box. Death walked to the plate. Josh was buried at Woodland Cemetery in Toledo, Ohio. And 2 months after his death in July, a group of all-stars from throughout the American League played the Cleveland Naps in an exhibition to benefit Joss's widow, Lillian, and their 2 children. Walter Johnson, Smokey Joe Wood pitched against Cleveland Cy Young, and other players who participated included Ty Cobb, Sam Crawford, Eddie Collins, and Tris Speaker. Over 15,000 tickets were sold for the game, in which the all-star team beat the Naps 5-3, raising over $12,000 for Josh's family. In 1978, the reason why most of you that have heard of Addie Joss have heard of him, the Veterans Committee waived the minimum of 10 seasons played rule for Addie Joss and elected him to the Hall of Fame 67 years after his untimely death. Addie Joss is truly one of the, biggest what-if stories in the history of baseball. His peak was Hall of Fame worthy, 2 ERA titles, a 1.89 ERA, the lowest whip ever. And he was just an unbelievable pitcher and seemed to be an unbelievable person, gone way too soon. And people have been saying, who's going to be the next Addie Joss? Is there going to ever be another player that's great enough in less than 10 years that they would waive the 10-year rule for? I hope we don't have to have that discussion, because it'll most likely mean an untimely death of someone that's gone way too soon or a traumatic injury. But Addie Joss made his historic debut on this date in 1902. And as Napoleon Lajoie said, one of the greatest players and men ever identified with the game of Major League Baseball. May he rest in peace. Now, closing things out here, we have the New York Mets, which I know Mookie's been in the comments talking about them. They're defying the odds right now. And I was one of the biggest Mick Met truthers last year. I was on the bandwagon. I was having a lot of fun. They go out this offseason. They bring back Pete Alonso and Sean Manaea. They sign Juan Soto and Frankie Montas and Clay Holmes and AJ Minter. It looked really good. Sean Manaea has not pitched an inning this year. Kadai Senga has had some hot and cold stretches. Frankie Montas is out for the year. I had them just missing the playoffs. I didn't have them being a bad team, but I had them just missing the playoffs. But they keep defying the odds. They're pitching to a top 5 staff ERA in baseball right now. Their bullpen is one of the few in Major League Baseball to give up single-digit home runs this season. They have been absolutely electric, and it's without Juan Soto really being Juan Soto right now. He's playing good baseball, but he's not playing MVP, middle of the order, top tier baseball. Francisco Lindor has been hitting bombs lately. Pete Alonso is setting himself up to make a lot of money this offseason. This is the kind of contract year people were expecting him to have last year, but I think the motivation of seeing what was out there this offseason, plus having the protection of Juan Soto and Lindor in front of him, is really unlocking a lot of things for him right now. He's been absolutely electric. The Polar Bear hitting a ton of home runs, top of the league in RBIs. This Mets team is truly, truly defying the odds right now, and I'm super excited about it. I don't know what their tagline is going to be this year because, I don't think they're bringing Grimace back. Jose Iglesias is gone, but this team is on a total heater. They're right on the Phillies' heels, taking games in that series from the Phillies. It's extremely, extremely exciting. They're in first place, man. Like it. I know the Phillies are right there in a lot of ways, but they just played head to head, and this Mets team, they're making noise, and it's really an exciting time. If any prediction that I made went wrong that I feel the best about, it's this. This team is playing great baseball. They haven't lost 10 games yet, and that's really, really exciting. It's a major league best record right now. I'm happy that I'm wrong, which is not usually the case. Usually when I'm wrong, the Minnesota Twins have been making me really, really sad. The Baltimore Orioles making me really sad. But being wrong about the Mets, I'm more than happy to be wrong about this because I was really worried about the pitching. The pitching has been way better than advertised. And this lineup I knew could hit. I knew this lineup was going to be a top 10, offense in baseball, probably top 5, if they hit their full ceiling. And the pitching is living up to those moments. It is really, really exciting. And I hope that, if the Mets are coming to your city, you go out and watch them right now because you got, potentially 3 Hall of Famers at the start of that lineup. Pete Alonso plays like this, gets a long-term commitment, and hits 500 home runs. He's a Hall of Famer. It's really, really exciting to be a Mets fan right now. Even towards the bottom of their lineup, you're getting contributions from Luis Angel Acuna. Jeff McNeil is working his way back. Francisco Alvarez is working his way back. Jesse Winker's hitting. Mark Vientos, is having some games here and there. This team has a ton to be excited about, and I'm going to be smiling despite the wrong prediction so far this year. It looks like they're clearly a playoff team with the way things stand. I appreciate each and every one of you for spending part of your Solo Shot Saturday with me. Hugo, Mookie, Orlando, Adam, everyone that was in the chat, thank you so much. For those of you that like the show or new here, make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, or subscribe or follow to the show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It really helps us out here. And share this show with a fan or a friend who loves the game of baseball as much as we do. I'm Don Manna, and I'll see you guys next week.